Hi, and welcome to another episode of Kasper On BI. I'm really excited to be here today with you to talk about Microsoft Fabric. The thing that you've probably seen all over Twitter, LinkedIn, you name it. It's been everywhere. It has been announced this week at Microsoft Build. And today in this episode, we're going to talk all about it. So let's go. All right. So everyone is really excited about Microsoft Fabric. But let's start to take it one step back. Why? What is Fabric trying to solve? What are the problems that we're seeing with customers? And I'm trying to look at it from the angle of the Power BI Cat team, now called the Fabric Cat team, which is pretty cool. But we see many customers, some of the biggest customers in the world, with their biggest data challenges. And many of them talk to us and complain a bit about fragmentation of products / tools. We have different products in different clouds and different services, different authentication methods, different way of connecting. They don't all really work together nicely. We have to move data between services or clouds. That data is sitting in silos and it's hard to find or hard to get to, and we still have to replicate data around. And in order for us to do that replication, in order for us to be able to connect to that data, we need to use processes that are still very IT heavy. And we need very expensive specialists to do so. And that is the problem that Fabric tries to solve. I mean, kind of the name says it already, right? The fabric, the data fabric of your organization. So Fabric is bringing together all those services that you need for all your data needs. It gives you all the tools for your people in your organization to make sense out of that data. We're going from SQL to DAX to Python to Spark, any way you want over the same set of data. And it's brought together, again, this is a key feature too, it's brought together as a single SaaS platform, just like Power BI. So if you're in an organization or if you're in a department and you want to create a warehouse or you want to create a Lakehouse or anything you want, you don't have to go to Azure and sign up and do all these things in Azure. No, you can just go ahead, create a workspace, get going. So easy to sign up. It works with Azure Active Directory the same way it works today with Power BI. So you can use conditional access. You can use all the tools and features that you know and love of Azure Active Directory to secure the Fabric platform. Low barrier, single navigation, so it's easy. Every workload, and we'll get to workloads in a second, every workload will have its similar navigation, its similar UI, so it feels very familiar. A simple collaboration model, if you want to work together, workspaces are there, just like in Power BI, again, feels very familiar. A single tenant administration, again, simplified experience, a single tenant administration, governance and compliance. There is a single governance and compliance in place across the whole platform. Same way as in Power BI today, but now extended. MIP labels, all of these great things are also coming to Fabric. Now, probably the biggest thing is it's a SaaS platform, so you don't have to worry about a lot of things like spinning up servers. What do I do when the server goes down? Downtime, replicas. It has an SLA. We'll take care of everything for you. It's a single licensing model, and we'll get back to that. Now, what does that mean for Power BI? You will ask. I mean, nothing really changes. We just use the platform that Power BI uses, like the sign-in, the UI, the navigation, as a starting point. Power BI is a workload inside of Fabric. It's part of Fabric, just like Word is part of Office. And like if you go to SharePoint Online, if you go to M365 Online, you can easily switch between services. If you want to do Word, if you want to do Exchange, if you want to do all these things, you can just switch around. You're all in the same UI. You all have the same license. It just works pretty flawlessly. The same thing will be with Fabric, with Power BI being one of them. Now, again, nothing has to change for your Power BI implementations. And honestly, I think especially in the near-term future, nothing will probably change for your Power BI implementations, but it could change things. And especially and we'll talk more about that in a second, especially the way that you access data can change. The reports, the dashboards, the DAX, that doesn't really change. The way you access data could potentially change because Fabric has way more options for you to be able to connect to the data. And that kind of ties back in, like all these products serve a different need, but they work easily together. Fabric allows you to change the way you connect your data, and it allows you to change the way that you have connect to data in your organization. Now, let's look at all the workloads in Trident. The most important thing is it all starts with a data lake. Fabric is a lake-centric and open environment. The foundation of everything in Fabric is what we call One Lake. And One Lake is that single unified SaaS data lake for the whole organization. No silos. It's the foundation for all Trident data artifacts. It provides full and open access through industry standard APIs and formats to any application. So no lock-in. And this is really key because it abstracts and disparate storage locations across regions, multiple clouds, even into a single lake. So I have a One Lake. That is what Fabric uses to run all its workloads on. And you automatically get a lake. Under the covers is running Data Lake Gen 2. But if you already have an existing ADLS in Azure, you can just mount it and it becomes part of your environment. And no matter how that data lands in there, it will be available for Trident or for Fabric to work with. And that's really important. We can even go across clouds. So we can connect to AWS to connect to data sitting in AWS in the lake and bring it into Fabric for you to be able to use. Now, again, something that I do want to point out, because we're also talking about some of the things that are not there yet today, because we just released Fabric as a public preview feature. It just turned on. There's lots of things in the works, and in the next couple of months, you will be able to see new features lighting up time after time, month after month, and we'll listen to your feedback and we'll make it better and improve. So some things might not be possible yet, but probably they will, and especially if the need is there from you and your customers. We'll listen and we'll put it into the product, just like we do with Power BI. Now, this One Lake provides a rich set of features and capabilities supporting common collaboration, sharing, analysis, security, and governance scenarios. Again, same thing. It's a one tenant, it's one platform, it's one single security layer. And the basis of this is something that we call One Security. A single place for you to secure your data into the lake. That is really key. More will be available on this later point. Today, we're not sharing that much information. Next week, I will have Josh Kaplan, who is the PM who drives One Lake, on the podcast, and we can ask him all the questions. All right. Now, we've talked about One Lake, so let's bring it home, because we need to talk about the rest of the workloads. And Fabric allows you to do many different things. But the main point is, okay, how are we going to land that data into the One Lake? Now, of course, let's look at an example. When I'm a department or an IT team, I start by creating a workspace, just like in Power BI. Now we want to get that data into those workspaces. So how do we get the data in here? Now, we're starting by allowing you to load data from all different places into that One Lake by using familiar tools, ADF, data flows. They're all available directly inside of your Fabric organization, and you can move that data from there into One Lake. No need to spin anything up. No need to start ADF or data flows. It's just installed when you need there, and it brings with it all the connectors that Power BI has and more. Now, I'm saying loading data, but you don't have to load data. If you already have an ADLS data lake sitting somewhere in Azure that you're already using today, you can just connect it to OneLake and immediately it becomes available to all the workloads that you have inside of Fabric. How cool is that? And again, that's just an example, but there's many different other things, like ADLS is one, Amazon S3 is another. So that's really, really cool. Now, and then again, as I said, you can just mount instead of importing. And that's really important to say. So those are ways that we can connect to data and we can import them. Now, we want to land it somewhere, but we want to do something in it. Because if you just have a file list or a file folder, this is cool, but there's not really so much you can do with it. So we want to have some sort of form of logical layer. And for this, we have options. The main options are, one, you can start by creating a data warehouse. And this is a data warehouse, a real data warehouse, the way that we know it, full-fledged data warehouse. And this is when you are a data warehousing professional or a SQL engineer. You want to work with SQL, you know databases, you know schemas, you know tables. You want to use store procedures, BCB, BCP. It's fully transactional the way you're used to it. Again, there's no services. You just go to the UI and you click new warehouse. Done. There are less knobs and turns and things that you are used to from existing data warehousing products like Synapse, for example. It just works and it's performant out of the box. Now, you use those tools that I mentioned before to load data into the warehouse, and you use the BCP or you use ADF or use data flows to land the data into that warehouse, into your tables, and you use store procedures to run, and you create new data tables. You do whatever you want to do with your data warehouse. The really cool thing here is that data is also being stored into the OneLake. Okay? And they're being stored in an open format called Delta Parquet. And I'll go back to that in a second. This is what we call one copy. More on that in a second. Because before we go there, I want to talk about the other way. Because the other option, the other logical representation is, okay, I am a data engineer or a data scientist, and my main skill set is Spark, Python, Spark SQL, not tables, not SQL Server. I want to have a lake. I want to have files. And that's where you can go ahead and create a Lakehouse. And the Lakehouse, again, is nothing more than a logical representation of files sitting in the lake. It has files, it has tables, and again, the data, when you move data to the Lakehouse and it creates a table in your Lakehouse, it's using that same Delta Parquet in the OneLake. So it stores that data in Delta Parquet in the OneLake. And now you can do things over it, like you can run Spark, you can run notebooks, you can do all these things to, for example, create that medallion architecture that a lot of people are talking about. So we go from raw data to bronze to silver to gold and refine it more and more to when you get to a gold layer. And updates go through that data tools or Spark or notebook. So really the difference is, who am I? What are the differences? And what are the things that I'm used to? Like, do I want fully transactional, being able to do transactions on the lowest level in the data warehouse, writing SQL, doing inserts, things like this? Then I would use my data warehouse as a logical layer. Am I a data scientist? Do I want to work with files in the lake? Do I want to use Spark SQL? Do I want to use Python? Do I want to use notebooks? I would choose a Lakehouse. But the most important thing here is, and there's more to it because Fabric is a lot to unpack, and I will get to more things in a second. But the most important thing here is, regardless on how you work with the data, it's always stored in the OneLake as Delta Parquet. Delta Parquet is open source, open data format. It's a column-oriented data file format designed for efficient data storage and retrieval. And it really efficiently compresses and encodes schemas, especially when we have data in bulk. It's available in every languages. You can connect to it with Rust, Java, C++, Python, whatever it is. And it's really the lingua franca of data storage in the industry. And this is where things get really interesting, because it's the lingua franca of files in the industry. Other tools like HD Insights or Databricks can read the data that is written by Fabric. Because you're writing something to an ADLS Gen 2, it can be written by other products too. Because it's open, it's not filed. And more interestingly, vice versa. If you have data sitting in Databricks and you write it into a Delta Parquet file, you can serve it up in Fabric, and you can use, and I didn't mention this, which is a really important thing to forget, the Lakehouse also comes with a SQL endpoint. So you can still query it with SQL. You cannot do inserts, you cannot do things like that into the Lakehouse with SQL, but you can query it with SQL. So you have files sitting in the lake, you want to send a SQL query, no problem, it works. And it's the same T-SQL. Of course, there are some small differences. Data warehouses, especially at this moment in time, there's more that you can do with it. And that's really important to understand. But again, the thing is going back to that one copy. In both scenarios, in both cases, the logical layer is different based on what your needs are and based on who you are. If you are a SQL Server developer like I am, that's my background, I would feel more comfortable building a data warehouse. But if you just came out of university, probably you're more familiar with notebooks and Spark and Lakehouses. So probably you want to start using Lakehouses in that regards. But most of the things, except actually working with that data, is different. You can write SQL, send SQL in both cases. Performance is nearly similar. Again, this is aspirations. I don't know exactly what works in this moment in time. It's very early. It's day one of public preview. So there's lots of things that probably won't work yet. But again, we're chipping away this month by month by month. Now, let's go back to that important thing, because we were talking about that Delta Parquet file sitting in the one lake. And we can do something really interesting with this, because this is something that we call one copy. Everything is stored in a Delta Parquet file, either it's warehouse or Lakehouse's front end. You manipulate data in the warehouse, you do a commit, automatically the Delta Parquet files get updated. You write something in the Lakehouse, immediately the Delta Parquet files getting updated. As the files are sitting there, you can use notebooks with Spark, Python, and SQL for the Lakehouse, that SQL endpoint on top of it. And if you're using ADLS instead of your Proficient One Lake, you could use that Databricks for that one copy. Now, finally, the coolest thing that I've kind of kept to the end, I will talk a bit more about some other workloads that I haven't covered yet too, but the coolest thing that I've kept to the end is Direct Lake. And Direct Lake is probably the thing that I am, but I am biased, probably the most excited about. Because Direct Lake allows you to use your Power BI reports directly on top of the data in the lake without having to import. Okay, the Power BI engine, FurdyPack, will load data directly from the lake as soon as you land it. So I'll pause a moment to let that sink in and think about the implications of this. To me, it's pretty mind-blowing, and let's unpack it for a little bit. So data from the lake gets loaded into the Lakehouse or into the warehouse. It lands into the Delta Parquet files. Immediately, that data will get loaded whenever someone loads a Power BI report and wants to query that data with DAX or MDX when a Power BI is loaded. It's not using direct query. No direct query. It's loading that data directly into the FurdyPack engine from the Delta Parquet files. So the Power BI engine loads that data directly from Delta Parquet. No import needed, because the team was smart enough to change the analysis services engine to make this happen. So we swapped out the storage engine for a Delta Parquet transcoder. So when your data in the Lakehouse gets updated, it will immediately show up in your reports. Data will get read again from Delta Parquet super fast, and immediately it will start showing results. And most important, queries will be as you are used to it today in analysis services. No direct query, no SQL queries being sent. There are some cases when SQL queries will be sent, but let's dive into details in a different session. That's a long discussion anyway. So there are many details that we can cover in later episodes. But in short, the workflow will be the following. You land your data into the OneLake, however you want, with a logical layer on top of it, either a Lakehouse or a warehouse. You now can create a model on top, in the web, on top of that data. You can create relationships, you can create DAX, all the things that you're used to. Now, every Lakehouse and warehouse will automatically get a data model created that's auto-generated, for instance, for instant insights, but probably you want to create your own model. But as soon as you have a model, that's it. Immediately you can create reports on top of data in the lake. No import needed. Any data changes in the Lakehouse will immediately show up. And there are many cool things that I actually didn't mention. But for example, in Lakehouses, you can create shortcuts. So let's say you create a workspace where you have sales data. You create a medallion layer, and now you have a sales warehouse sitting here, and you create a data set on top, and that's great. Now you create a new workspace, and you want to use customers from your sales, and you want to use that customers as something else. You can create a new workspace somewhere else, and you can create a new Lakehouse. And let's say you want to use those customers again. In the past, what you would have to do is actually copy that data over into the new location, import it into analysis services, and use it. But not anymore. You can create a shortcut that actually shortcuts that table from the other Lakehouse into the new Lakehouse. But it's a shortcut, just like Windows shortcut or when you're using symlinks in Linux. It's not a copy, it's a reference to that table. So immediately it will show up, and you can start using that in your new model. Isn't that really amazing and cool? So you can start reusing data from across the different Lakehouses. Probably there are some data domains. Again, I don't want to go into a whole architecture. We can probably talk for a couple of days on all of this stuff. But you can use those shortcuts into your new analysis services model. Okay, but that's it. Oh, so how cool is that? So what are some of the implications? What are some of the things to think about? Of course, you create that model, and data will only get loaded into memory when people start using it. And it will only load the data in memory what is needed. It won't load the whole model in memory anymore, the way that we're used to. So that's really important to mention too. So potentially you can get much more for the same amount of memory that you're already used to today. Yeah, and maybe the other thing to mention, again, we'll get back to that in a little bit later. Maybe there are some things that you are thinking about, like for example, hey, I don't want my data to be updated immediately because my data gets updated throughout the day. How do I make sure that my CFO only gets the real and the right data to show up? Well, you can start tweaking this with something we call framing. And again, we'll go back into that for later, but you can actually still run a processing command to the new model, and that new model will use the history feature of the Delta Parquet files, because every Delta Parquet file has a history assigned to it. And the analysis services engine will now look at the data at the particular moment in time. By default, it will automatically update. So it automatically will always look at the latest history of the files, but you can turn it off and you can control it yourself. And now you can actually create some sort of processing features like we have in Azure Analysis Service if you want to control what customers or users can see. But you don't have to do this. By default, it will automatically always show up. And this is really cool. So So how cool is that? I am really excited about Direct Lake, and I will start showing up at conferences pretty soon to talk about this, and I will get some guests on the channel too to talk about 30 parquet for sure, and then / Direct Lake. This 30 parquet is what we used to call it. Direct Lake is what it is. Now, there's a lot to unpack here. And I didn't even talk about all the workloads. There are other workloads too. And I'll quickly mention them. And I hope I'm not forgetting any, because that's also possible. But we'll start with Synapse Data Engineering. And Synapse Data Engineering is what allows us to create lakehouses, to run notebooks, and to do things like this. Synapse Data Warehousing allows us to create data warehouses. That makes sense. Data Science, of course, Spark, things like this. Real-time analytics, we didn't really talk about this, but this is what we know as Kusto, or what we know as in Azure, where you can do log stream analytics and things like this. So data gets loaded into the Lakehouse, but coming from factories or log files or things like this, and you really want to analyze this fast, real-time analytics is the way to go. Of course, Data Factory, ADF, and data flows to load in data, Power BI on top, and something that is called Data Activator. We'll talk more about that later, but that is a way for you to look at streaming data and take action immediately as it is happening. So that's really important too. So a lot to discuss. I already have been talking for like 30 minutes just on a lot of these things. I probably have missed some items and I've missed some things. Maybe I've even said a bit too much. At this moment in time, there is so much to digest and so much to talk about. So I hope I don't get into trouble. I don't think so. But yeah, so go ahead, go to your existing Power BI, ask your tenant admin to turn on Fabric, because by default it's turned off, to turn on some of those Fabric features and allows you to play with it. Today, you can get a free trial. You can just go in and play with it. Going forward, the majority of these things will be premium capacity only. They will use the capacity just like large models will do. As you can imagine, Spark will do. There will be some changes to the capacity model too. You will get more flexibility and more things that you will do. But again, more we'll talk about that in the future. And again, it's really early. So we are really excited for you to play and try it. Give us your feedback. You know we're listening. If you look at Twitter right now, when the announcements are going on, you will see Arun is there, Amir is there. The whole PM team is listening, are responding to your questions and to your comments. So we are really excited about it, and we'll do more in-depth sessions in the coming weeks. I already have Josh Kaplan lined up to do a OneLake session. I have Charles Webb lined up to do a data warehouse / Lakehouse / data mars, because I didn't really even talk about that yet. Discussion. I want to talk about Direct Lake. Lots to think about, lots to discuss. Play with it. Let us know. And really thank you for your time. And I hope you enjoy it. Thank you.